And thank you very much for watching or listening. Liam Hartery here today with another episode of Presenting Champions. And today I'm truly honored and blessed to be joined by Jeremy Horn, who is obviously an MMA legend, and not only an MMA legend, but an MMA pioneer as well. This man has been in the sport from the very beginning, competed in over 170 fights from the days when MMA was barely legal to the present day. He's obviously well known for the UFC, but has fought in many other promotions as well, and has fought against some of the best names in the business, as well as being a legend himself. He's faced quite a few other legends, including Anderson Silva, Chuck Liddell, Nogueira, one of the Nogueira brothers, Shamrock. There's so many names. I've actually got a list of them here. He's been in with the best of the best. So we're going to be talking today about his life and career, his journey from the beginning of MMA to the present day. And as always, my interviews, not just about the sports side of things, but the mindset that it takes to become great at the toughest sports in the world as well. So, Champ, that's enough about me talking about you in third person, but I just wanted to rattle off a few of your achievements. Thank you for coming on the show, and it's a real honor to have you with us. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoy doing interviews and podcasts and stuff like that because I'm always kind of amazed that people are interested in hearing anything that I have to say. So I'm always anxious to do it.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's a pleasure, and I think you have a lot to say. So we'll get into that in a minute. But I like the humble side of that. So starting at the beginning, I was saying about like 170 plus fights. I'm sure people ask you this a lot, but just as an obvious place to start, do you know how many fights you've actually had, or have you lost track by now?
No, I lost track a while ago. It's in this somewhere in the 170, 180 range. I'm not really certain. Like there were, so I kind of started fighting before they were actually recording all the fights, and some of them got recorded. Like my first fight is actually on record, but it was real spotty recording. So there were years where I had 20 or 30 fights in a year, and only a handful of the promoters would actually record them. Now it's all big enough that most people know about it, but I think it's still that way today. I don't know about the more major organizations, but if a promotion does a fight, it's actually their responsibility to submit the results to the databases for it to be recorded. So there's lots of promoters that just didn't bother to do that. So a lot of times fights would just fade away.
So that's what happened there. Yeah, that's fair enough, because I think you are listed online somewhere in like the 120 range, but I'm aware that there's more, as you say, that sort of fell through the cracks. So brilliant. Okay, obviously this is going to be a source of interest for a lot of people because you got into the sport of mixed martial arts when it wasn't even properly legal. It wasn't sanctioned. I've had a few guys on this show who started in that era, including Shannon Rich and a couple of people like that who've been doing this since like the early 90s or whatever. But can you walk us through some of the changes you've seen in the rule sets and things? Because I mean, I guess when you first started out, there were virtually no rules in at least some of these events, right?
Yeah, there were very, very limited rules. Most people just adhered to, no biting and no eye gouging. That's it. Some of them would restrict groin shots, but everybody wore a cup, so that was honestly not a real big deal for a lot of people or a lot of promotions. They thought you want to try to kick somebody in the nuts, go ahead, but don't bite them and don't poke them in the eyes. And then hair pulling was generally acceptable, but a lot of people cut their hair short, so it was kind of a non-issue. So yeah, that's all there was when I started. And then over the years, a few promoters here and there would add weight classes. A few of them would require gloves. The time changes, or the time, the rounds, the time limits would fluctuate a little bit. I fought Jamie Levine was a promoter down in Florida that did a show called the World Extreme Fighting, and he would use 8-minute rounds. So 3 rounds was a normal fight, so we would do a 25-minute fight. Now a 25-minute fight is a title fight because we're doing 5 rounds. But yeah, so that was the big thing, is things got a little bit more regulated, but it fluctuated quite a bit back then.
I can imagine, and it is amazing as well the changes you must have seen. What are your thoughts on those changes? I mean, again, I know you've talked about this a little bit, but you have seen it go from totally, no holds barred and unregulated and no gloves and all this stuff to being the sport that we know today, which is obviously very regulated, and what have you. Pros and cons of that, in your personal opinion?
Yeah, I'm a little bit torn because on one hand, I'm a competitor, I'm a participant in the sport, but on the other hand, I'm also a fan of the sport. So, the rounds I don't mind, because there has to be some sort of start and end. I guess we could do one round, of 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. I don't really like the stand-ups. The thing is, like, the sport is moving in a direction where the strikers are being favored pretty heavily. You get a 5-minute round, and then within that 5-minute round, the referee will separate you for stalling and stand you back up. If you're not on the ground really going to work and hustling, you're going to get stood up. They'll separate you if you're pressing him against the cage for too long. And then obviously every round, even if you take him down, you're going to be forced to start back on your feet. It's just, and then even on the ground, different rules have been implemented. You can't knee people to the head on the ground. You can't kick people in the head on the ground. It used to be a reasonably major deal. If you could take somebody down and get to side control, you could knee them in the head from side control or north-south. Now those weapons are lost. So yeah, it's just, it's frustrating, but I also understand that, from a spectator side, they have to do that to a certain extent to keep the fights exciting, to draw the fan base. So I wish the rules weren't like that, but I kind of understand why they are. So if we want the sport to continue to grow in viewership and fan base, then I guess we have to kind of absorb those negatives as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a good look at both sides of the coin, if you like, with the good and the bad side. So that's
Yeah.
very cool. Now, something I'd like to touch on here with yourself is obviously those early days of MMA, when you first got into the sport. I'd like to talk about your motivations and things at that time. And the reason for asking this is obviously now people get into MMA, from day one. They want to be UFC champion, they want to be Bellator champion, they want to get to a high level, whatever it is. There's sort of a path laid out for them, thanks to the pioneers such as yourself. But in your day, there wasn't really, it wasn't really like that. So when you were motivated to pursue, you obviously love to fight. I mean, that goes without saying. But in terms of wanting to pursue it as a career, it didn't really have a foundation. It didn't really have a track to run on. So can you talk to us a little bit about those early days, what they were like in terms of your motivation, your mindset, and what initially attracted you to the sport in the very beginning, if that makes sense?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, what attracted me is what still attracts me, is I like to fight. The competition is what has always been most interesting to me. That's why I don't really, I try not to stand out. I don't necessarily want to be famous. I think I'm pretty lucky that I've been able to do what I've done over the course of my career, due to fans, being willing to pay money to watch me fight. But if there was no fan base there, if there was no money in the sport, I would still be fighting. I would just be working a full-time job and then fighting on the weekends, because I like to fight. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would do that as well. Along the same lines, I like to fight because I want to prove, that I'm good. Back in the day, everybody wants to prove that you're the best. And now it really is. It bugs me to see people getting into the sport because it's just a financial gain for them. And yeah, there's money in the sport, and I guess I can't really fault them too much for that. But it really bugs me when You'll see somebody in the UFC and they'll win a fight, and then in the post fight interview, the first thing they say is, hey, where's my bonus money? Where's my money? It's like, fuck, if all you want is money, go do something else. This is this sport is not about making money, or it shouldn't be. It should be about proving who's the best fighter. So yeah, that kind of bugs me. That was always my motivation. I want to fight. I want to prove I'm the best. I want to prove I'm better than the other guy. That's it.
Yeah, it makes sense that, a true, authentic reason for doing it. I love that. Obviously, I'm guessing then that it's as simple as that, that's what's kept you going, competing at the highest level for so many years. Because one of the things that I think is amazing about you and your career is obviously you love it, but you've continued performing at the highest level for many, many years. And that obviously takes physical and mental toughness. So is that love of fighting? I mean, and is that enough to keep the fire inside you burning for all the years you've been doing this, if you get what I mean with this?
Yeah. It did for a long, long time. I mean, I've obviously slowed down over the last few years. And unfortunately, the problem is I did not lose interest in fighting, but I did lose interest in all the really, really hard training. Nobody wants to get up anymore at 5 a.m. and go run and adhere to a really, really tight diet, do all the cardio and all that stuff. I still enjoy training, and I would still love to fight, but I'm in a position now, obviously being who I am, I can't be anonymous. So I can't go in there and fight without training, because everybody that's going to fight me is going to be coming to take my head off. So I got to make sure that I'm prepared. But yeah, so that's kind of why the fighting has slowed down. If I could somehow maintain a high level of fitness and, keep my weight in check without having to do all that nasty stuff, then yeah, I'd still be fighting every weekend.
Absolutely. Well, you touched on your training there. I mean, I was going to ask this later on, but it's another interesting thing about the transition that you've been through over many years of doing this. How has your training changed from, say, the early days when there probably wasn't as much technical knowledge? I mean, you from the sound of what you were saying there, you made it sound like earlier on in your career you would turn up with maybe minimal training and just fight. I don't know if I've got the wrong end of the stick with that, but just talk to us about how that has changed and sort of adapted over the years as well.
Well, that's the biggest thing, like you said, is there's a lot more resources out there now. Obviously, YouTube is huge. There's people putting a lot of content out there that's free, so you can actually learn quite a bit by watching YouTube. But that's the biggest thing is, my training habits, I guess you'd say, my scheduling has been largely the same. It's usually, a typical practice is 2 or sometimes 3 hours long, and it's usually an hour of like drilling some sort of technique and just working on improving your skill, and then an hour of just live, sparring, rolling, whatever that happens to be, and then a couple of times throughout the week, add a little bit of cardio or conditioning on top of that, and that's pretty typical. That's what it's always been. It's just that now the technique is a lot more focused. It's a lot better technique, obviously, and the cardio side of things, the conditioning side of things, is also likewise a lot more focused and more intelligent. It used to be just figure out something that was really, really hard to do and do it until you couldn't do it anymore. Now it's, well, let's train at this level of effort for this amount of minutes because studies have proven that blah, blah, blah. Just you can get a little bit more analytical about things as more information is out there to be had.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I did see a quote, I can't remember if it was Joe Rogan or one of those guys, but about how martial arts has developed more in the past, say, 20, 30 years than it has in thousands of years previous to that.
Yeah.
And it's a true saying. Talking about some of the fights themselves and some of the fights that you've had, there's too many, obviously, to go through them all. So what I was thinking is if we look at this from some broader questions about this, one of the obvious ones that I'd love to ask you is about your proudest moments. I mean, obviously, you said already you don't care about the fame, you don't really care about these other things, and it's all about testing yourself and testing your limits and things of that nature. So, looking at it from that point of view, do you have particular fights, particular wins that mean more to you than any others out of all of them?
Yeah, absolutely. People ask me this a lot, what's my favorite fight? And it's always the same one. My fight with Forrest Griffin.
Mm.
We fought in a tournament in the IFC. I'd have to look it up to see when it was, but he was my second fight in the tournament. I love tournaments. I always have. My style is very conducive to tournaments because obviously as a grappler and I'm not a big brawler that's going to stand up and take a lot of damage to win fights. I'm going to grab somebody and pull them to the ground and choke them, and I'm going to try to get out of there without taking a scratch. So my style is always suited well for tournaments. So yeah, we fought in the second round of a tournament. I ended up winning in the second round, I believe. I kicked him in the head. But it was a pretty cool finish. But really what makes that fight my favorite is, do you train yourself?
I do, yeah. I mean, nothing like your level or anything like that.
No, still, but I mean, have you ever fought? You ever wrestled? Done any like actual competitions?
A little bit, but like mostly just kickboxing, like the Muay Thai side of things.
Sure. Well, so the same thing applies. So no matter whether you win or lose the fight, at the end of that fight, you look back at it and go, I could have done this better. I should have done this. I missed this opportunity for this. I was a little shy here. You always critique yourself after a fight, no matter how, you always know that you can do better. But in that fight with Forrest Griffin, I feel like that was the closest I have ever come to fighting at my full potential. I for whatever reason, man, maybe it's because it was my second fight that night. You kind of get all the jitters out early. But in that fight, it really was like watching everything in slow motion. Just all of the movement was easy. The punches, I could see him coming. Everything he did, I was anticipating it and could work through it. I've never had that feeling before where just everything felt perfect. I felt like that was the best I've ever fought in any of my fights ever. So spent the rest of my career trying to recreate that feeling.
That is amazing, because obviously that was a fantastic fight with Forrest. But, from the outside looking in, from watching your fights, it was a fantastic performance. But it's amazing to get the inside track on it, is what I'm trying to say, from, you, as you say, critiquing yourself and everything. I thought that one might come up actually, but amazing. So toughest fights, this is always a fan favorite question. And other fighters watching this will know that comes in many forms. So it's obviously not always, somebody who hits hard or somebody who's the best grappler. I mean, it can be something that's going on outside of the cage in your life that, made the performance. It comes in many, many forms, as you know all too well. But are there any that stand out for being like the most challenging fights out of so many to choose?
Yeah. Definitely. So my fight with Anderson Silva was one. And then my second fight with Chuck was the other. Those were the two most difficult fights, for different reasons, though. In my fight with Anderson Silva, I was in great shape. Everything, I felt really good in that fight, except for the fact that in the very first takedown, like 10 or 15 seconds into the first round, I pulled a groin muscle really badly. And so I knew, like, you ever pulled a groin muscle?
Yeah.
You can feel it pop. You move and you can feel that snap. You're like, oh, something's wrong. And so I felt it right away, and I was like, man, my leg's not going to last much longer. It's going to stop working soon. And I knew that was coming. So, that's the fight. Have you seen my fight with Anderson?
Yeah, I've seen it.
So that's where, like, I finally pick him up and I slammed him on his head as hard as I could. I thought, man, I've got to try to finish this fight because I'm not going to survive if my leg doesn't work. And then sure enough, it didn't finish him. He's tough. And, he ended up just beating the hell out of me for the rest of the fight because my leg wasn't working, and obviously he's incredibly good. That's not a good combination when I'm not 100% and I'm fighting one of the best fighters in the world. So yeah, he just beat the crap out of me for the next 3 rounds. But in that fight, I felt pretty strong mentally. I was moving forward. I was doing my best. I was going to keep fighting to the very end, even though I knew my leg wasn't working anymore. And then my second fight with Chuck was kind of the opposite. I trained really hard for that fight, and I was in really good shape again. But I had like zero game plan going into that fight. Everybody knows what Chuck is all about. Very, very hard to take down. Very, very hard puncher. He's going to stay on his feet and he's going to knock you out. But if you can take him down, he's a little bit weaker. I'm the exact opposite, right? I'm all ground game and minimal striking. And in that fight, for whatever reason, I just never really developed enough of a game plan to try to take him down much. I don't know. My brain I just left that in the locker room, I guess, because I go out there and, I think I shot a couple of times, but not very aggressively and not very committed. And, obviously everybody saw that fight. That was not one of my best performances, but it wasn't so much because, he beat the crap out of me too, but it was just, I basically had zero game plan. I thought, man, I'm in such good shape. Whatever happens, I'll win eventually because I'm in really good shape. There was no thought to a game plan at all. Like, hey, maybe I should try to take him down. Maybe I should try to wear him out, whatever. It was, hey, I'm in good shape. Sooner or later, he'll just fall over dead, so.
Yeah. Well, it's a brutally honest appraisal. I can definitely say that. But as you say, you live and learn, and it is amazing to get the inside track on this. You mentioned Anderson. You mentioned some of these guys. Do you keep in touch with any of these guys? I mean, obviously they're all doing different things. I mean, Anderson's obviously boxing and doing what he's doing. There's people who've got their own promotions. There's people who are still fighting. People who are retired. Obviously, Travis Fulton, who you fought, he's died, and those horrendous circumstances by
Yeah.
his own hand. People have gone down all different paths, but do you follow much of that or keep in touch with any of these guys now, or do you just sort of stay in your own lane and carry on?
Yeah, I kind of keep to myself. I really always kind of did. I've always occupied a really unique space in the fighting world because I'm kind of a dork. Like I'm not a jock. I'm not like, yes, I'm a good athlete, but I'm not an athlete. Like think about what you would think of like, a high level athlete in high school, right? Like he's with all his high school buddies. They go to the parties on the weekends and hang out at the bonfire and whatever else. I never did any of that. I don't want to do that. I play video games. I hide in my basement with my dogs. That's all I want to do. I don't, except when I go to the gym, I'm an athlete. When I go fight, I'm an athlete. So, and that's kind of how it was even when I was training back in Iowa with all the guys there at Pat's place and everybody. So like in the gym, I was one of their peers. I was a fellow athlete and I was good and I was a fellow fighter. But outside of the gym, I never hung out with any of those guys. Don't get me wrong, we're friends and I get along with them. But like they would all go out, they'd want to go out to the bar, they'd go out to, the local football games. I'm just like, I just never wanted to do any of that. So I really never hung out with any of the guys outside of the gym. But in the gym, great friends, great training partners for many years. That's kind of how it's always been. I just in the gym, in the fight, in my world, I am a peer to these people. Outside, in my everyday life, out in the street, I don't have anything in common with them at all. So, yeah, I mean, I chat with Pat every now and then on Facebook. I'll see the guys here and there on Facebook and say hi, but yeah, they're kind of doing their thing now and I'm doing mine. Jens was always one that was kind of similar. He and I are both gamers, so he and I have stayed in touch over the years here and there, but still, people drift apart, move into their own circles. He's raising a family and they're doing great. So
Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it does make a lot of sense. And obviously, I've actually heard quite a few fighters share pretty much, an identical mindset, to be honest with you. Obviously, people come in all different forms, but you very much strike me as sort of a get it done type of person in that sense. And I get where you're coming from with that 100%. I'm the same, by the way. So, okay, amazing. So, we've touched on toughest fights. We've touched on this. Now, obviously, you mentioned earlier about your grappling expertise, and you mentioned this. Now, one other question about favorites before we move into like the future, we move into some other things. Favorite submission. I have to ask this because of because there's quite a few to choose from because of your expertise in this area. I mean, it's just a fun question. Specifically, on the ground, specifically in terms of submissions, do you have a favorite there, or not, or not? Maybe not one, or maybe more.
no, I don't really have a favorite submission. I guess you could say my favorite strategy, I guess, my favorite thing to do to people. I have always been very much like a pressure fighter. So like I'm gonna get on top of you, I'm gonna make you suffer, I'm gonna make you miserable, and then you're gonna fold up and quit and give me something because I'm gonna make it so hard on you. So I don't really care what that happens to be that you give me, but that's kind of always been my thing is I'm gonna be coming at you and I'm gonna keep coming at you until you can't take it. So yeah, I don't care what that submission is. I did a grappling match a long time ago and the same kind of thing happened. So, if I'm doing a grappling match, then I'm coming at you to submit you. I don't care about points. I don't care about, positional, dominance other than how it pertains to me getting a submission on you. So me and this guy we're going at it. His name is Ken Kronvold, I think it was. Another old school grappler from way back in the day, late 90s. Real tough guy. And so we're going back and forth, and I'm just, I'm taking him down over and over. I'm trying to pass his guard. I got to the mount a couple of times, trying to submit him, and then we're running out of time. And I shoot in again, and he catches me in a pretty tight guillotine, and then the time runs out. And I win by however many points it was. And one of the guys comes up to me after the match. He's like, "Hey, I'm just wondering, like, why did you risk that takedown when there was only 30 seconds left? You were up on so many points." I was like, I had no idea what the points were. I won like 20-5 or something like that. It was just a blowout because I just took him down so many times and was all over him. But I'm like, I don't pay attention to the points. I didn't even know how many points I had. There was time left, and I hadn't submitted him yet, so I'm going to keep trying. So yeah, that's been my favorite submission, is just pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of those quotes there, and this is going to sound strange, but I could totally see them on like a T-shirt or something. Like you've got "I Heart Violence," like you could really put, "I'm going to make you suffer and make you miserable," or whatever you said there. I mean, that would be a great slogan. I mean, that's just. But no, yeah, I get where you're coming from totally, and it's again, it's a great insight. Talking into sort of the present day, into the future, that side of things. I mean, you mentioned earlier about the training, about being in tip-top shape, about kind of wishing you could sort of slip into some of these fights and not be as noticed or whatever. What are your future plans in the fight game? Obviously, you've done a bit of boxing in recent times, as I understand it. I haven't actually seen the boxing fights, to be honest. I've seen many of your MMA fights. I've just heard a bit about the boxing fights, although I will watch them after this call probably. But obviously, you've been doing a bit of that. Is that something that you plan to continue and sort of pursue a bit more, because there's a lot of MMA guys going into that, or what's the sort of future goals?
Yeah, same kind of thing. Like I said, my desire. So I'm in kind of an awkward spot, because in the MMA world, I was pretty good and obviously pretty well known, and upper half of the skill ladder. And so it's hard for me to say, "Hey, I want to still fight," but I don't want to have to train really hard to fight the best. Well, it's not really fair of me to then go fight like the bottom half of the bracket, because I think I'm probably still pretty good, and it would be, it wouldn't be fair. So if I want to go get some competition, I've got to do it in an area where I don't excel. I mean, I'm a decent boxer, but clearly in the MMA world, I'm primarily a grappler. So for me to go in and do boxing, it gives me the opportunity to still get some competition, still have some fun. But it's kind of like resetting my skill tree to a certain degree. Going back to the early days where as a boxer, I'm still pretty green. As an MMA fighter, as a grappler, that's where I excel. That's where I'm really good. But as a boxer, I'm like, I'm okay. So it's an opportunity for me to get some competition without having to jump right to the front of the line and fight killers. Because I'm not a killer when it comes to boxing,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so as far as continuing to fight, yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably do a few more, but that's where it gets tough, because eventually, I mean, I don't want to keep fighting guys that are not a challenge, right? I mean, if I end up getting decent at boxing, I'm going to have to face that same challenge, either start training harder and start climbing the ladder and fighting tougher and tougher guys, or accept the fact that I'm going to fight guys that are basically bums that have no chance of beating me. Excuse me. And that's not any fun. I'm here for a challenge, not just to go slap people around and feel like a tough guy. So
yeah,
tough spot to be in.
Yeah, it is. It is. I totally get the mindset. I mean, I totally get wanting to test yourself and everything, but moving out of your comfort zone. I mean, there's a lot of things there. I mean, to be honest, I hope that personally, and I think that people who enjoy watching fights, and never mind about like my journalism or the other things I do, but just looking at it as a fight fan and somebody who enjoys being around it, I hope you continue and have a few more. But I totally get the predicament. I mean, it's a tough. It's a tough one to figure out. Another thing here is obviously the concept of passing on your knowledge and sort of coaching and training. You'll have to fill in maybe a few blanks here because I'm not sure how much of that you do, or if that's something you do, or if you're interested in. But in terms of like coaching and sort of giving back to the next generation, and obviously that's a very simple transition a lot of people go through. Is that something that interests you? Is that something you plan to do in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I run a gym now and I have for, geez, coming up on 20 years now.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I started the gym obviously when I was still fighting, but, I had a big hand in training all the guys back in Iowa, and Tim and Jens and Matt and Robbie and Spencer and all those guys. I had a big hand in training them. I've always loved coaching people. I seem to be kind of a natural teacher because wherever I find myself, I end up reaching out to people that are less experienced and trying to help them get better. Right. I'm just a natural teacher. So yeah, I mean, I've been running the gym for a while, and I love training guys. And for a while, I was training some really really good guys. I don't know if you know Demarcus Johnson. He was in the Ultimate Fighter. I trained him. Excuse me. Sean O'Connell won the light heavyweight season, the first season of the PFL. I trained him. A handful of other guys here and there have come and trained with me over the years. But as far as running a successful business, it can be hard to do that when you're training guys that want to be, when they're seeking a career in fighting, because that doesn't really gel too well with running a gym for kind of the average guy that wants to just have fun and get in shape and enjoys the sport. It's like, how do you mix a group of, say, you know, college basketball players that are pursuing a career in the NBA, and then throw them in with a bunch of guys that just like to go to the YMCA on the weekend and play basketball with their buddies. Right? They both want to play basketball, but there's a big difference in the drive and focus and goals of those two groups. And if you mix those two groups in a fighting environment, somebody's going to get hurt. So, you know, I've kind of stepped away a little bit from training the fighters that want to really pursue a career. I've got a few that still do, but mostly I want to train the people that, they're just looking for, like, they're looking to improve their lives through martial arts, whether that's self-defense or fitness or just an outlet for stress. I mean, martial arts has so many benefits that it can offer people. And I'm having a lot of fun doing that. Just training your average guy or girl that just wants to have fun, and maybe, some low-level amateur local fights just to have some fun. But I'm not really looking to take on people that are like, my goal is to become a UFC champion. I'm like, I don't know if I really want to deal with that anymore.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. First of all, I mean, the clarification, I appreciate that because I had heard of you training certain people and doing bits and pieces, but I wasn't sure if you were still doing it, or obviously that makes sense now. So totally. I mean, yeah, it's all about what makes you happy at the end of the day. Personally, I know we've just met today. I can see you being a great coach. I'm not just saying that because you have like a very good um patience to sort of think things through step by step, and I can sort of imagine you in that scenario, building people from the ground up at like a nice pace.
Right.
And I know that might sound strange, but I just generally get that vibe, and it's a good thing. But it's all about what makes you happy at the end of the day. I would like to further that by getting a few words of advice, because obviously when I put this interview out there, it'll go all over the place, like the UK, Europe, the USA, different places. So any sort of up and coming fighters listening to this, I know you've sort of said that you want to step away from people who want to be the next champion, but I still like to just pick up a couple of things. Like if you had to give essential ingredients, somebody says, I want to succeed in fighting, I want to do well in this. Or even if we broaden that and say people have a big goal and they say, I want to achieve something big in life, you would say is essential that they have to do? I know it's kind of a big question, so
For
maybe just
sure.
one or two things.
I mean, I would think the biggest thing is to truly evaluate your motivations, because I don't think you're going to go very far if your goal is misplaced. So like if your goal is to become a fighter because you want to be rich, well, you're not going to be rich until you're at the very top of the pile, and that's a huge if. And there's a lot of space between now and then. Like, you're going to be not just average until you're rich, you're going to be broke and poor, until you make it there, if you make it there, right? So your motivations are huge. If you decide that if you decide you want to fight because you want to be famous, well, that's not going to happen for a long, long time either, So you need to really accurately assess your motivations, right? You need to fight because you want to fight. The fighting is all that matters to you. I want to go into the ring. I want to prove myself. I want to test myself. I want to be the best that I can be. I want to beat that guy standing across the ring from me. If those are your goals and motivations, then it doesn't matter what level you're fighting at because you're achieving your goal, right? Your very first smoker fight, in the local bar with 40 people watching is just as meaningful as your first fight in the UFC because all you're trying to do is accept another challenge and test yourself and prove yourself. So that's the big thing. I see a lot of guys that come into the sport, and they're like, all right, I've never done anything. I smoke. I have no athletic background. I've decided I want to be a professional fighter. When can I take my first fight and how much money am I going to make? I'm like, dude, just get the fuck out, right? Like first of all, you're going to be an amateur for 5 years. You're not going to make a dime. And then even when you start fighting as a pro, you're going to make nothing for many years. So are you ready, starting from right now, to not make a dime for potentially the next 10 years before you make enough money to live on as a fighter? And they're like, oh, no, I can't do that. Well, then get the fuck out because that's how it's going to go. You need to be here because you love martial arts and you want to compete and you want to fight. And then if there's some money in it, awesome. It's a nice bonus down the road, but that's way down the road.
Yeah, that's some rock solid advice right there. Brilliant. I mean, honestly, I first of all, I was laughing just because I can picture that conversation going down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of here. I mean, it's brilliant. First of all, but the other thing, I mean, yeah, it's true. Obviously, it's true, and it's a very valuable life lesson for whatever people are doing. You have to love what you're doing. You have to love the process. Obviously, you're testament to that with your own sort of longevity and everything because you love it. And I don't know if you've seen this, but I have seen a lot of people get into MMA, boxing, different combat sports, basically with the intention of getting rich. It doesn't happen. They end up feeling sort of bitter and disgruntled and
Yeah,
unhappy. Whereas obviously, I've seen a lot of people end up like that. Whereas obviously, if you're getting into it for the love, as you say, every fight's a bonus. Every
yeah,
win is a blessing. The process itself is a blessing. So um, really, really good advice. I knew there'd be something good in there, but it's just that was a really good lesson. And definitely in the world we live in today as well, when you see a lot of people, you see a lot of these, you see a lot of these celebrity boxing matches and people, turn up at a fight and pretend to argue with someone or trash talk with them or whatever, just so they can
right.
have a big money fight and all that. And it's far away from what the sport truly is at its heart. So we've talked about some good stuff here, to be quite honest with you. Last couple of things before we wrap this up. Obviously, I know you've said that you don't do this obviously for the fame, and we've really established that. But you do have some great fans and some great supporters out there who really appreciate what you're doing now, appreciate the career that you have had. So, what would you say to some of those people if there's people watching who are basically people who follow you, support you? Maybe they followed you for a long time. I know that's not why you do it, just if there's any words for them.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Like those people are what have allowed me to have the career that I have. Right. Like, I mean, I don't like I said, if there was no money in fighting, I would have had the same career that I've had, but I would have been working a full-time job while I'm doing it. So, the fans loving the sport enough to being willing to spend money to go buy tickets and watch me fight has what's provided me the opportunity to live the life that I have. So I could not be more thankful and more appreciative of the fans. Like, I kind of wonder, like, why are you my fan? I mean, I'm just an average guy, but I'm very thankful and very appreciative of them. I'm very, very blessed that they are willing to do that for me because I have lived a very, very enjoyable life. I mean, long story short, but basically the last time I had a real job, it was like 25 years ago. I've been a professional fighter my entire life. So I've gotten to live a life of vacation basically my entire life. Get up every day, go to the gym, go train with my buddies, go fight here and there, got to travel the world. I mean, I've had a really cool life and it's because of the fans. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, that's usually what I close out on, to be honest, because, as you mentioned, nothing is possible without them. And the other blessings, you have been all over the world as well. You have fought the best of the best. I mean, it's so many sort of intangible blessings that
Yeah,
go sort of
I've
beyond.
gotten to travel all over. It's awesome.
Yeah. That is another cool bonus of being a professional as well. But honestly, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. And I appreciate you taking time out of your afternoon. Obviously, it's evening here and everything, but your afternoon, and I appreciate you being so open and everything about all of this. I mean, I know it's sort of the type of person you are, but as well as the fun questions, we've gone into a few deeper things as well, which hopefully makes it a little bit different as an interview. So I appreciate all that, and I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have as well.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's always cool to talk about it. I still love the sport and I love talking about it. And I hope that the fans out there enjoy it and, get some questions answered. And obviously, if you wanted to ever do it again, if they end up having questions, I'd love to come back and do it again. So,
Absolutely. I mean, we can do that as well, because the cool thing about you is there's so much more basically. I mean, even when I rattled off the list of names at the beginning, I mean, there's so many guys missing from that. There's so many other guys you
yeah.
fought. There's so many other stories you must have. I mean, you touched on places that fighting has taken you, so there's probably stories there. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much more. So yeah, definitely, if you want to do a part two one day, I'd be up for that.
Absolutely.
But for now, thank you so much for this one,
My
uh,
pleasure.
and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to the Simply Inspired YouTube channel, and there'll be more videos coming soon.